How many of you are still here after that stirring introduction? One issue with YouTube, of many, and again, YouTube is awesome in many ways for this stuff, even though I constantly criticize it because there's so much information you can find out about spirituality, the law of attraction, stress management, etc. on YouTube. It's just like a crazy playing field of whatever. But one of the many problems with that is that there's a tendency, including I'm the same way as anybody else, there's a tendency to like watch new videos and not to watch someone's previous stuff. And like for me, like a lot of the stuff I talk about, including the video I made yesterday concerning that Neville quote about affirmations and denials, I've spoken about elsewhere. I've probably spoken about it more clearly, or definitely spoken about it more clearly in my podcast. And I've also touched upon it in my books. So, you know, I see comments, understandably, I'm the same way, people being like, who are new to this channel, who are watching these new videos, who don't know my podcast or my books, or some of the older videos I've done on this subject, and they just are totally lost. I get that. I apologize. And at the same time, you have to recognize what you're dealing with, which is YouTube, which is social media, which is not, as I keep on saying, the best way to find out about what I'm talking about. And if you want to learn specifically from me, my books and my podcast are probably better avenues to turn to. If you want to see a dude in a white hoodie in front of his house and, you know, us not necessarily knowing who's going to pass on by outside, this is a pretty good, you know, place to turn. But because I feel bad slightly, not that bad, but a little bad about not being able to clarify some of the points I wanted to yesterday as thoroughly as I perhaps could have, let me just try to clarify it this way. Yesterday's video about, with that great Neville quote, about affirmations and denials. In my opinion, that is not actually about Neville saying do affirmations or don't do affirmations. It's about this larger point about how we become, by becoming indifferent to things fade from our world. And, you know, affirmations, generally speaking, make things come into our world. But to think like, I'm actually a huge proponent of, you know, both affirmations and denials. I think they're the same thing. They're a statement. And I think like the last point I was trying to make yesterday when I was having trouble discussing it, the reason I think I was having trouble discussing it is because the point Neville makes there is when you're trying not to think of something, you often think of it. You know, the famous example, don't think of the pink elephant, you're immediately going to think of the pink elephant. And there's this tendency to, you know, when we say we don't want something to happen or this is not going to happen, to then think about it, the bad scenario happening. Lester Levinson has this in his autobiography, No Attachments, No Aversions. He talks about how not should be a word that nobody uses. It shouldn't be in the English language. Because if you say, I'm not going to fall, you're then going to fall. That's a whole school of thought about, you know, language and not, you know, being careful what you're saying. What I want to tell you in this video is I don't believe in that. I love denials. I love saying not, like, don't do this. I'm not going to do that. I made a video very recently, I'll link to it above, talking about this. I'm all about using negative statements, quote unquote negative statements, saying this is not going to happen. The issue is, what I was trying to touch upon yesterday is that often we say something forcefully like, this is not going to happen. I'm not going to allow this to happen. But then we spend the rest of the day thinking about how it still might happen. That's very different than with power and with feeling, saying this is not going to happen. This is not going to happen, and meaning it. If you really mean something's not going to happen and you impregnate that idea in your subconscious, which you can do through repetitive affirmation, but you can do through so many other LOA techniques as well, including, just to name a few, SATs, or also, talking out loud to yourself, with feeling. You can, say that something is not going to happen by just like your general behavior, right? It doesn't have to be just affirming this is not going to happen, this is not going to happen. If you do it and you mean it, and you're not thinking the opposite, which is that it is going to happen, but you really are thinking consistently throughout the day, this is not going to happen when you think about the issue, it's not going to happen probably. Denials are freaking great. So when I quoted that Neville line yesterday about affirmations and denials, it wasn't really about that. It was more about indifference as far as I'm concerned. And again, it's a great quote. And again, what I want to point out is that this stuff is nuanced, or the stuff we're talking about on this channel is nuanced. And when you watch these videos, especially if you haven't watched a lot of them or you're not that familiar with my stuff, you might not initially grasp what I'm saying. You have to watch several to begin to grasp it. That is just the nature of YouTube. Like, for instance, I remember when I first found Maggie's stuff, aka Neville Goddess, it took me a couple videos to even begin to understand what she was saying, meaning that at first I was like, oh, this is just another YouTube lady talking about Neville. And then after a couple videos, I was like, wait a minute, this is entirely different. She actually knows what she's talking about. This actually is nuanced. While if, I had found Maggie's stuff on Reddit before that, if I had read one of her posts, I would have known pretty much right away that it was totally different. But on YouTube, it's going to be different. At first, you're not going to be able to tell. Whatever. I mean, this might be getting, too far into the weeds anyway. Most of the stuff doesn't even matter. But it's just something you can be aware of in terms of thinking about this stuff. So yeah, I was thinking about reading another Neville quote, but we're already 7 minutes in. There's no way well, maybe I can find one quickly. I'm not gonna do one today. All I want to say is I want to emphasize yet again, this is Manifesting Miracles. I edited this book back in 2014. All it is it was a different day and age back then in terms of Neville's stuff. All it is At Your Command, which is Neville's first book from, I think, 1939, and the question and answer section of his 5 lessons lectures, which were from, I think, 1948. And those two things, At Your Command and the questions and answers from 5 lessons, just that is like a pretty damn good distillation of Neville's advice if you don't want to get overwhelmed by it. This video, I think, is talking a lot about getting overwhelmed. There's so much information. We go on YouTube, there's always new stuff. Do this, do that, do this, do that. If you read a book like Manifesting Miracles, you're not going to get as overwhelmed. Again, this is why, in my opinion, books help you streamline your spiritual process, your manifesting process, your stress reduction, anxiety reduction process, more than watching people like myself on YouTube probably do. And you can listen to the audiobook if you don't want to read. That's okay too. There's a lot of good stuff in this video, but again, it's hard to tell if you don't know who I am. You're like, this is just some dude rambling. But the magic when it comes to YouTube is in the ramble. So yeah, I hope this was helpful. Again, if you have questions, contact me on my website, radicalcounselor.com. I do not look at all the comments on YouTube intentionally. I do not respond to comments on YouTube intentionally for many of the reasons that we just discussed directly and indirectly in this video. And yeah, this video is pretty in the weeds, but that's sometimes a good place to be. Enjoy your day.